Welcome. You've arrived at another quiet journey through time, where history unfolds not with clamor or excitement, but in a steady rhythm, calm enough to let your mind wander, and, perhaps, to drift softly into sleep. Tonight, we travel far back, to the lands of the Nile. When we think of ancient Egypt, the mind often leaps to towering pyramids, golden masks, and mighty pharaohs carved in stone. But those marvels were only a small part of Egyptian life. Beyond the grand monuments and legendary rulers, millions of ordinary people lived quiet. Difficult, yet deeply rhythmic lives along the river's edge. In this exploration, we will sink gently into the texture of that world. We will begin with the fields and the villages, with what it was, really, like to live as a farmer in the age of the pharaohs. Then, we will look closely at a singular, controversial ruler who dared to change the very gods themselves. From there, we will descend into the mystery of one of history's most famous tombs, the resting place of Tutankhamun. And finally, we will enter the palace halls, where the rich scents of oils, incense, and carefully prepared feasts offered a life far removed from the dusty labor of the fields. So, let your breathing slow. Let your shoulders release their tension. Imagine yourself floating quietly down the Nile. The water reflects the soft shimmer of the moon, while reeds sway gently in the night air. The current is unhurried, and so is our story. Imagine, it is early morning in ancient Egypt. The sun has not yet fully risen, but the day's work already calls you. You are not a pharaoh, not a priest, not even a craftsman in the city. You are a farmer, one of countless men and women whose hands fed the civilization that would endure for thousands of years. Your home is simple, built of mud brick. The walls are thick, holding back the heat, though in the summer months. The air inside still feels heavy, dense with warmth. The ceiling is low, and in one corner rests a small mat where you and your family sleep. There is no mattress, no cushion. Only woven reeds, rough against the skin, but serviceable. The smell of earth and smoke lingers from the small hearth where meals are cooked. Outside, the land is waiting. Everything in your life revolves around the Nile. Its yearly floods dictate your survival. When the waters rise, they leave behind rich black silt, fertile and nourishing. When they do not, famine looms. You live not by your own will, but by the river's mercy. The tools in your hand are simple: a wooden plow pulled by oxen and baskets for seed. The work is repetitive, rhythmic. Guiding animals, bending low, scattering grain, pressing seed into the damp soil. It is tiring, but it is steady, the kind of work that sets the tempo of a lifetime. The sun climbs higher. The light is blinding, reflecting from sand and water alike. There is little shade in the open fields. You feel sweat gather on your skin, not dripping quickly, but slowly soaking into the fabric of your linen tunic, coarse and light. Around you, flies buzz in constant swarms. You swat them away again and again, but they always return. It is a small irritation, unending, a reminder that life here was rarely comfortable. At midday, you pause. The meal is simple. Bread, rough and chewy, baked from Emar wheat, perhaps some onions, a handful of figs if fortune allows, and water drawn from jars cooled in the shade. Occasionally, a jug of beer, not strong but thick, nourishing, almost more food than drink. As the afternoon wears on, the heat presses down harder. You push through, continuing until the sun lowers and shadows lengthen. Finally, you guide the oxen back and return home. Inside the village, sounds of life surround you. Children run barefoot in the dust. Women grind grain with heavy stones. Their movements steady, their songs quiet and repetitive, almost like a chant. Chickens cluck nearby. A goat bleats. The smell of baking bread drifts through the air. Evening brings a small relief. The desert cools, and the stars emerge in a sky clear and bright. You gather with family near the doorway of your home. Conversation is gentle, sometimes absent. 4 voices are tired from the day. A fire flickers. The smoke carries upward, curling into the night. And then, at last, you lie down again on your reed mat. The ground beneath you is firm, and comfort is minimal, but sleep comes quickly, for the body is exhausted. Tomorrow, the cycle begins again. The same rhythms, the same labor, the same reliance on the river. A life of repetition, of quiet endurance. The rhythm of the ancient Egyptian farmer. This was the reality for the vast majority of people in that world. Their lives sustained the temples, the monuments, the rulers, yet their names were rarely remembered. And so, as we drift through history, it is worth pausing in these humble homes to acknowledge that civilization rests not only on golden crowns, but on countless hands guiding oxen through the fields. From the quiet homes of farmers, let us now step gently into the world of kings. The pharaohs of Egypt were seen not simply as rulers, but as living gods, intermediaries between the divine and mortal realms. For centuries, their duty was to maintain harmony, a balance the Egyptians called Mat. Most pharaohs upheld tradition. They honored the pantheon of many gods: Amen, Osiris, Isis, Hathor, and countless others. Temples rose across the land. Priests carried out rituals, and festivals marked the calendar. Religion was as much about stability as it was about belief. But then, in the 14th century BCE, a single pharaoh tried to change everything. His name was Akhenaten. Imagine him standing tall in a palace at Amarna, a city he ordered to be built in the desert, away from the old centers of power. His face, as depicted in art, is unusual. Elongated features, narrow chin, almost otherworldly. He appears unlike the statues of earlier pharaohs, who were shown as strong, muscular, timeless. Akhenaten allowed his likeness to be carved differently, softer, more human, perhaps deliberately so. Akhenaten is remembered for one of history's most dramatic religious experiments. He declared that Egypt should abandon its multitude of gods and worship only a single deity, the Aten, represented by the disk of the sun. Rays of sunlight extended down to earth in images, each beam ending in a small hand, offering life and blessings. To most Egyptians, this must have been bewildering. For generations, their lives had been shaped by rituals to many gods. Local shrines honored protective deities. Households had small figures for blessings and fertility. Now the pharaoh announced that all of this should be set aside. The priesthood of Amen, centered in Thebes, was especially powerful and wealthy. Temples had vast estates, and priests held great influence. Akhenaten sought to break this power. By elevating Aten above all, he cut against the priesthood's authority. Life in Amarna revolved around this new worship. Open-air temples were built, designed to let sunlight flood the altars. Hymns were composed to Aten, praising the daily rising of the sun as the source of all life. Akhenaten himself, along with his queen Nefertiti, appeared in countless carvings, shown in tender family scenes, bathed in rays of Aten. But while the art of this period shows intimacy and warmth, the reality for Egyptians may have been one of confusion. Traditions were uprooted. Long-held beliefs, prayers, and rituals suddenly no longer aligned with the state's decree. Farmers still worked the fields. Craftsmen still shaped pottery. But the comforting rhythm of worship, the familiar cycle of festivals and processions, was disrupted. Akhenaten reigned for roughly 17 years. And then, suddenly, he was gone. After his death, the old ways returned swiftly. Temples to Aten were abandoned. Statues and inscriptions of Akhenaten were defaced or destroyed. His memory erased in what is called damnatio memoria, the condemnation of memory. His successor, the young Tutankhaten, even changed his name to Tutankhamun, restoring devotion to Amen and the traditional pantheon. In the quiet sweep of history, Akhenaten's bold vision was only a brief interruption. His city of Amarna fell into ruin. His religious experiment faded. Yet the story lingers, of a pharaoh who sought to reshape an entire civilization, and of a people who, after his passing, simply returned to the old, familiar rhythms that had guided them for centuries. And so, from the solitude of dusty fields, we have wandered into the gilded but uncertain world of royal revolution. Now, let us descend further, away from the living world entirely, into the silence of tombs, where another pharaoh, Tutankhamun, would capture the imagination of future ages in ways Akhenaten never could. We leave behind the palaces of Amarna and step now into the hushed, still air of the Valley of the Kings. It is a place of cliffs and silence, where the heat of the desert presses down and tombs lie hidden beneath the earth. Among these tombs, none is more famous than that of Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun was only a child when he became pharaoh. His reign was short, his deeds relatively modest compared to the great builders and conquerors who came before and after him. Yet it is his tomb, discovered more than 3,000 years later, that made his name eternal. Imagine the valley in 1922. The English archaeologist Howard Carter, after years of searching, stands in the dust with his team. They uncover a set of steps cut into the rock. At the bottom lies a sealed doorway marked with the royal insignia. Beyond it, unknown chambers, untouched for millennia. When Carter finally peered inside, he described seeing wonderful things: gold, statues, treasures packed tightly into small rooms. Unlike most royal tombs, which had been looted in antiquity, Tutankhamun's resting place remained almost intact. But why? The tomb itself is modest, smaller than those of other kings. Perhaps Tutankhamun died unexpectedly at only 18 or 19 years old, leaving little time for a grander burial. Some scholars believe his tomb was originally meant for another noble, hastily adapted for the young pharaoh's sudden death. Inside, the walls are decorated, though more simply than in larger tombs. The burial chamber glows with painted scenes. Tutankhamun, greeted by deities, embraced by Osiris, stepping into eternity. His sarcophagus was nested inside multiple coffins, the innermost made of solid gold. And upon his face lay the mask that has become one of the most iconic artifacts in the world, the serene, golden visage of the Boy King. For Carter and his team, the discovery was overwhelming. Yet, along with wonder, came whispers of a curse. Newspapers printed stories that those who entered the tomb would meet untimely deaths. In truth, most members of the expedition lived long lives. The legend of a curse was more invention than reality, yet it reflected something deeper: the sense of awe, and perhaps unease that this intact tomb inspired. Archaeology since then has raised new mysteries. Some believe Tutankhamun's death was sudden and suspicious. Examinations of his mummy have revealed injuries and illnesses: a broken leg, signs of malaria, perhaps congenital issues from generations of royal inbreeding. Was his death an accident, a sickness, or something darker? Others have studied the tomb's construction itself. Certain wall paintings show unusual cracking, leading some scientists to suggest that Carter's team may have stumbled upon traces of an ancient attempt at chemical preservation gone wrong. Still others point to the hasty decoration as if craftsmen had rushed to complete the work. And then there is the unanswered question of his lineage. Tutankhamun was almost certainly the son of Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh we explored before. His reign, then, represents the restoration of the old gods after Aten's brief supremacy. In that sense, his short life carried symbolic weight. He was the bridge between disruption and return, the pharaoh who ended one experiment and rejoined Egypt with its traditions. Today, Tutankhamun's treasures rest in museums, his face familiar across the world. But in his own time, he was little more than a minor king, buried quickly, forgotten for centuries. His fame is not from what he accomplished in life, but from what his death left behind. It's hidden in the earth, waiting for quiet discovery. The tomb itself still lies in the Valley of the Kings. Tourists enter its chambers softly, their voices hushed, footsteps echoing faintly. The golden treasures are gone, but the air is still heavy with the weight of history. Imagine standing there, deep beneath the rock, with walls painted in fading pigments, and the silence of 3,000 years pressing close. And so, from the everyday lives of farmers to the bold experiments of Akhenaten, to the mystery of a boy king's resting place, we continue our journey. Now, let us rise from the tombs and walk once more into the sunlight, into the world of luxury and power. For our final chapter, we will step into the palace itself and see how life unfolded for those who lived at the very top of Egyptian society. We leave the silence of the tombs now and return to the brightness of day, but not to the dusty fields or the crowded villages. This time, we step into a place very few Egyptians would ever see, the palace of the pharaoh. Imagine approaching such a palace. The walls are whitewashed mud brick, gleaming in the sun. Painted columns rise tall, their surfaces decorated with lotus flowers and papyrus stems. The air carries the scent of incense, frankincense, and myrrh, wafting from bronze burners placed near doorways. Guards in crisp linen stand at attention, and inside, the halls open into wide courtyards where sunlight floods in. Here, life was a world apart. The pharaoh's palace was not simply a residence. It was a symbol of order, of divinity, of Egypt itself. Every detail carried meaning. Floors were covered in reed mats or painted plaster. Walls were adorned with bright murals, scenes of hunting, of the river teeming with fish, of birds in flight. Furniture was crafted of imported wood, inlaid with ivory and gold. Servants moved quietly through the halls, their tasks endless but carefully ordered. Some fanned the air, others poured wine. Still others brought trays of food. For the pharaoh and his family, meals were a feast of variety. Bread baked with honey, roasted meats, freshwater fish, fruits like dates and figs, vegetables seasoned with herbs. Beer and wine flowed freely. Unlike the farmers who labored with coarse bread and onions, here the diet was rich and abundant. The queen and royal children lived within these walls as well. They wore fine linen garments, pleated and starched. Jewelry glimmered at necks and wrists. Gold bangles, turquoise amulets, lapis lazuli beads. The smell of perfumed oils lingered on the skin, masking the desert heat. Beyond meals and clothing, there were rituals. The pharaoh did not simply live as a king. He embodied the role of a divine figure. Each morning, priests performed ceremonies in the temples, often on the king's behalf, ensuring that the gods were honored and that Egypt remained in balance. Within the palace, audiences were held. Officials came to present records of harvests, construction projects, foreign tribute. The king sat upon a throne, elevated above all others, a visual reminder of his higher status. But not every moment was formal. In quiet hours, gardens offered respite. Pools filled with lotus flowers shimmered under the sun, and exotic trees provided shade. Birds called from cages, and small monkeys kept as pets, darted among the branches. In these gardens, the pharaoh and his family could walk, surrounded not by dust and toil, but by cultivated beauty. Contrast this with the farmer's life we visited in our first segment. For the farmer, each day was defined by labor, repetition, and dependence on the river. For the palace elite, the day was shaped by ceremony, luxury, and a sense of distance from those struggles. Yet in the end, both farmer and pharaoh shared the same sun, the same Nile, and ultimately the same fate: to enter the tomb and pass into the afterlife. Life in the palace was not without its burdens. Intrigue, politics, and a constant demand to maintain divine order pressed heavily on the shoulders of the pharaoh. Yet, compared to the hardship of ordinary people, the palace offered a rare kind of comfort. Fine food, scented halls, music drifting from harps and flutes, and the quiet rustle of linen robes in a cool, shaded chamber. And so, our journey through ancient Egypt nears its close. We have walked the dusty paths of farmers, labored beneath the relentless sun. We have watched as a daring king sought to change the gods themselves. We have entered the hushed silence of Tutankhamun's tomb. And now we have stood in the palace, breathing the perfume of privilege, surrounded by golden song. Through it all, the rhythm of Egyptian life unfolds. Steady, repetitive, eternal, guided by the Nile. A world at once harsh and beautiful, ordinary and extraordinary. Soon, we will leave this land behind and return to our own time. But before we do, let us rest once more by the river's edge and let the story settle like the soft silt of the flood.